performance to celebrate these two new books by Jessica Roda and Jeremiah Lockwood, For Women and Girls Only and Golden Ages. This is an event we're doing in partnership with the American Society for Jewish Music and Jewish Music Forum, so thank you very much for joining us with that. And we're really pleased to have Jonathan Boyarin moderating today's panel and performances from Yoel Kohn and Malky Goldman. Before I hand it over to get started, I just want to say a brief word about YIVO. We're a very special place for the celebration and contemplation of Eastern European Jewish history, culture, including it was a very special place for Yiddish. We have a library and archive with over 23 million documents and over 400,000 books, which researchers from around the world use. In addition to making these materials available, we have a variety of public programs like this, classes and exhibitions, which bring to life the world of these collections and of this culture and of this history. So thank you so much for joining us as we do this work, and thank you to tonight's guests.
Good evening, and thanks to everybody who's here online, and especially to everybody who came out in the rain, trusting, no doubt, as my mother said to us when we were kids, you're not made of sugar, you won't melt. Tonight, we're going to be talking about performance, of course, and talking about performance is a performance in itself, right? I insisted when we started with the working group on religion and media at NYU about 15, 20 years ago almost, that I would participate only on the understanding that speech is a medium as well, right? And then we'll be treated to some performances, as Alex said. So I'd like to begin by reminding everyone that performance is not just an expression or reflection of Jewishness, but rather the very heart of Jewishness. What do the people say upon receiving the Torah from the hands of Moshe Rabbeinu? Anybody? Na'aseh v'nishma, exactly. We'll do it. We'll perform. And then we'll listen. This evening, we're celebrating two wonderful recent books about various forms that performance takes in North American Jewish communities today. Jessica Roda's new book from NYU Press is titled, and Alex already said it, but I'll say it again, For Women and Girls Only, Reshaping Jewish Orthodoxy Through the Arts in the Digital Age. It's based on extraordinarily patient and insightful anthropological fieldwork with Jewish women, both Haredi and, as we say, ex, who are active in various media, primarily in Montreal and New York City. And among other virtues, her book documents the creative possibilities that precisely new media afford people in these traditionalist communities. One comment on the book jacket enthuses that the book sings at the pulsing intersection of gender, religion, and media studies. And if you don't want to believe me, Ayala Fader from Fordham similarly calls it a remarkably innovative contribution to the ethnographic study of gender and religion, while Kelly Chalamet from Harvard calls it a major contribution to the anthropology of religion and beyond. And Jessica's book, like Jeremiah's, contribute to the field of academic Jewish studies, among other things, by making available to people outside Jewish studies some sense of just how interesting Jews are and what we can learn about human beings from Jews. Jeremiah's new book from the University of California Press is Golden Ages, Hasidic Singers and Cantorial Revival in the Digital Era. His book focuses on male performers and offers a portrait of contemporary efforts, again, often within the margins of traditionalist communities, to recapture the almost lost heritage of chazanas generations ago. Lockwood's special domain is Jews and their music but his study speaks to larger processes of cultural rescue and their limits. In this respect, very much like Jessica's book, Jeremiah's explodes any lingering notions we might have had that strictly Orthodox communities operate only through the rigid and unreflexive continuation of unchanging tradition. We've got a full program this evening, so I'm going to turn right now to a set of questions I'd like to ask you two. And in fact, I think it's evidence of how much your books speak to each other that exactly the same questions seem pertinent for both of you. So, first question for Jessica and Jeremiah. How does or did the particular constellation of identities, women, men, artists, Jews, ex-Orthodox, among the performers you studied and write about, intersect with the range of identities through which you understand yourself, whether at the beginning of this research or perhaps slightly differently now?
Should I start? First of all, thank you so much for being here. Thank you, Jonathan, for being the moderator for this special event, special night. So to respond to your question, because we are digging right away to actually the subjectivity of the writer, I would say. What has been the most surprising for me, or not surprising, but challenging, is this, and I write about it in the book, is this constant movement between the different spaces that I explore in the book. So I started this research by working with people who left the community, and progressively, so I enter inside and outside, and to respond to your question about identity, I think it's a lot that there's a constant movement and constant also uncertainty about maybe who we are and how we are situating ourselves. Not this idea that we are changing the narrative, but, or maybe we do actually. We at a certain moment, we reinforce a certain aspect of our own identity. And I think when I started this project, I was a little bit more certain about where I was going. And throughout the years, and throughout the book, I hope it comes out that I really try to give voices to different women, and through that, it's also questioning who I was as a woman, and maybe also as a mother, because when you work with women in the community and also the one who left, there is always this question that is at the core. So that's why I bring motherhood here. Maybe I will stop here, but this to maybe summarize this idea of the movement and this identity that is not static. Yeah, and maybe the other interesting aspect is that I had access also to male spaces, musical spaces, something that maybe Jeremiah, through your work, you didn't have access to the musical spaces of female. So maybe, in a way, not the luxury, but the advantage sometimes in certain cases. Right. And the disadvantage as well, but not necessarily to access certain cultural production.
Right.
Yeah.
You were not troubled by a ban on kol ish.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I might begin by noting that I wasn't planning to write about Hasidic Jews when I began my project, and I continued throughout the research to view the artists who I was working with primarily as cantors. And not as Hasidic Jews, and it took a while for me to kind of accept the fact that the ethnography I was doing had to do with a separatist community, and that I needed to take care around this issue of seeing how the identities of these singers as members of a separatist religious community changes the meaning of their work as artists. At first, I wanted to write about early 20th century cantorial music, and then gradually came to see that the people who were most interested in this were all coming out of the same kind of separatist Orthodox milieu of Hasidic Brooklyn. But this idea that the artists have multiple multiple languages that they can speak to, or there are multiple frames of reference that you can look at them through, comes out of perhaps my experiences of being a musician first, maybe, and that, or in terms of looking at Jews, the first frame of reference that I have because of my family background with being from a Cantorial family was to look at Jewish music and the experience of music as a sacred experience as being the most important frame of reference for me. And so coming to understand the music as they did, the Cantors, as being this kind of a counterculture, basically, right? That also took time for me to understand, that this music wasn't something that they were receiving as a kind of a tradition that they were going to be receiving through a kind of a normative linear progression, but rather it was going to be sort of a leap across time in this, and that would allow them to have this kind of vivid, explosive experience of themselves as artists in ways that were otherwise forbidden to them, in their communities. So that was something that came gradually, right, to understand this.
It's a counterculture.
I think it's off.
Mic on? Yes. It's a counterculture that can only be effective against the background of a dominant subculture, in a sense, right? And a dynamic that reminds me of something that Isaac Schoenfeld said to our son Jonah years ago. He said, "Ois Yid ken me werden, ois Chassid nicht." You can stop being a Jew, but it's harder to stop being a Chassid, right? So, the second thing I was wondering about is, I'm big on the dynamics of loss and on loss as constitutive of Jewishness. So I was wondering about the role of loss in sparking recuperation, which is very prominent in your book, Jeremiah, perhaps less so in Jessica's. Jeremiah, could you speak about that key theme a bit? And then Jessica, would you care to say something about the particular inflections of personal and communal loss in shaping women's Jewish creativity today? Because I can't believe that Jeremiah's performers are only looking backward and Jessica's are only looking forward. So I'm kind of asking you to sort of flip the emphases that appear in your books.
Yeah, well, the retrospective orientation is very native to Jewish creative arts, and especially to Jewish music, that Jewish musicians, as long as there has been some kind of written documentation, Jewish musicians have been talking about how what they're doing, no matter how new it is actually a reclamation of something from the past. And I think this has to do with in the current moment, what I would describe as the scandal of the impoverishment of aesthetics in Jewish life, right? That there's an issue with the normative musical culture of the community being somehow something that is a source of shame, right? That the music is inadequate to the greatness of the tradition, right? And I think this is kind of relates to what my interlocutors, the research participants in my project, called the normal music of their community, and that they defined themselves in opposite to. And the normal music is, like a form of pop culture, right? That's highly appropriative of American popular music.
It's a small electric organ. Right, that's the essential.
Well, I mean, I don't want to get too reductive about it. It's a very interesting field, and it's complicated what it consists of. And I mean, the fact of the matter is that it hasn't really been studied. I mean, Gordon Dale's dissertation on this theme, is kind of the first piece of scholarship about it. But basically, the normal music of American Orthodoxy is kind of unknown, right? Other than to people who are deep in the scene. So I mean, it's interesting also that Jessica's book and my book are about kind of subcultures, which are in some way or another, either contra to or involved with from the margins, but the actual normal, the center of this musical world, has not really received a very thorough scholarly treatment, at least in the North American context. I think maybe in Israel there actually is some scholarship on this that's more robust, but that said, in terms of speaking about retrospection and loss, right, if you as a sensitive young person who loves the arts want to have a language with which to speak, using the tools of aesthetics, as a musician, let's say, you're going to be looking somewhere, and the past is in a way sort of a safe place to look, because the past is always more holy than the present. So, what I learned from the Hasidic cantors who I was working with was that this old body of music that I tended to think of in this kind of sacralized way, as being this holy, revered past, was actually something you could use in the present to do countercultural work with, right?
So I think, for the women I work with, first of all, the dialogue between both our book is indeed this idea of creating, I wouldn't say a counterculture, but something that in this case that didn't exist. And, to have a loss, you need to indeed, or to experience loss in this case, even if performance for women and girls only always existed in different circumstances in the Orthodox and Haredi world, through schools and summer camps. And what is very new is the two elements that I'm talking about in the book: the informal market through the home studios and a lot of private spaces, and the other part is the industry and this idea of the celebrity. And an industry that didn't exist, that is trying also to be extremely influenced by this mainstream Orthodox male, space. But in the case of the women that I work with, it didn't exist. So that's why also they are looking forward, because this is the possibility of a novelty. And I think if we can talk about loss, throughout my ethnography, maybe this, for the most conservative who are maybe not disappointed, but who were sometimes critical of the women who decided to label for women and girls only and to have on DVDs or on streaming. Maybe there's a certain loss for the women who will look at this industry as something that is moving forward, that is not appropriate in terms of the loss of a tradition. So I would say, but it's not in terms of the sound of the repertoire that is a loss, compared to, so it's not about aesthetic. I think, and towards the end of the research, I discovered the work of Hannah Raskin, Reza Circle, and I think in this case there is, maybe some of you know about her work, and in this case there is a certain idea of a loss of an aesthetic or trying also to reinvent it. But in this book, it's much more about, the novelty. And I would say the loss would be how some of the women will look at it as.
So I want to ask both of you, how did the increased personal isolation and the increased mediatization of social life associated with COVID plague intensify or otherwise shape the field of performance on which you're concentrating?
Yes, so that's a very interesting, that was an interesting moment, because when COVID hit, I was supposed to go to do, field work in New York for several weeks, and it was the end. But actually something very fascinating occurred, and this is two important part of the book, the chapter on the celebrity and the other one on the influencer the growth and actually the explosion following the growth, I would say, of music video. I don't know if Dobie Baum is here tonight, but she was one of the pioneer to actually create online Zoom concert, and there was also Instagram Live. And I remember one day there was about 1,000, women and girls connected on the Zoom call, and on each little screen there were about 2 or 3 girls or women. So that's a lot of, and from across the globe. So it was very interesting to see this community, this transnational community emerging and booming. And you have a lot of music video now, and the industry just emerged. So yeah, I would say that it has been I can talk for hours about that, but I'm going to stop here.
Okay. Yeah, and I have more questions I could ask you about that, but I'm going to move on to Jeremiah.
I think in this area, Jessica's project was much more keyed in to the dynamics of what social media had to do for the artists she was working with. The Cantorial revivalists were heavily stymied by the closure, especially of modern Orthodox synagogues. So Hasidic cantors have trouble finding jobs. And this is one of the main issues that I address in the book, that what they're doing is not really addressing the mainstream of American synagogue life, but those cantors who do have jobs work in modern Orthodox synagogues for the most part, not in Hasidic synagogues. And modern Orthodox synagogues, like other religious institutions in America, closed for the most part during COVID. So there was some switch to Zoom, but just a little bit, right? Because Orthodoxy did not embrace Zoom.
You can't do it on Shabbat.
Right. So basically, the practical use of the prayer music as music of actual prayer services, that seems to have stopped. So I'm sure that there were underground prayer services that were taking places, but it was not a widespread phenomenon. And then in terms of cantorial concerts, there were a bunch of Zoom-based concerts that were produced and that were kind of impressively well attended. Where 1,000 people would be on the Zoom for these concerts. But in general, I would say that the Zoom period was a notable slowing down of the scene, similar in a lot of ways to other music scenes, because the cantorial revivalist scene is primarily a music performance genre, right? And so, like other music performance genres, the absence of live performance seriously impacted the
Can I just add something? So what was also extremely fascinating is that it started online, and this idea of creating, community online, and then some of them also met in person. So and there's a follow-up on a lot of different, concerts that occurred and in person following that, not online. Yeah.
So I want to ask both of you, and we have a few more minutes among the three of us, and then want to open it up. Do you see analogous phenomena with respect, for example, to cultural recuperation by non-traditionalist members of the group, or pushing at the boundaries of a given counter-public? Do you see analogies among other groups, racialized groups, those differently gendered, those in various diasporas? And how would you go generally about articulating your research with the work of scholars who study performance in other similar groups?
I think that there's a comparison that is worth making to other forms of music revival. The cantorial revival is perhaps different in that it's not as blatantly tied to discourses of nationalism as other musical revival. Here, sing in a few moments, bemoaned the fact that Chazonis doesn't have its New Orleans, right? He noted that this speaks to the issue of retrospection and recuperation, right? That the idea of Chazonis as being born out of an Eastern European geographic and temporal location that does not currently exist is an important frame of reference. But this idea of a lost era, right, in which there was a spiritually heightened musical output that was being made, and that people had access to tradition in a different way than is current. That is a frame of reference that speaks to larger American musical urges. This is something that I mean, the blues revival scene that I was heavily involved with as a young person has a similar kind of feeling to it in some ways. Yeah, perhaps that's enough on that.
So I think for me, I made some, connection also with what Muslim women and also Christian conservative, women are. So I'm thinking about the work of Anne Rasmussen, for instance, and that work on Muslim women, and also how they are using tradition, and actually how the comfort of tradition and the fact that indeed they are in a restricted space, they were able to push certain boundaries. And the other also similarity, not similarity, but kind of dialogue that I would like to make is the work of Kate Bowler, who wrote a lot about celebrity in Christian world. Even she doesn't, there's a certain section where she talks about artists as well. But I think the similarity will be much more how, in this case, women are using art or their position to create new spaces and new opportunities for who they want it to be. And here I see some similarities and some echoes with other conservative religion. Yeah.
That makes sense. I'm starting to feel like Amy Goodman on Democracy Now! When she has a guest and she says, we have about 30 seconds, right? So real quick, my last, Amy, this is Amy Goodman, Juan Gonzalez. Real quick to both of you. Both of your studies are oriented toward performers and producers of cultural content. What would folks interested in reception studies make of the audiences of the people that you're focusing on?
Yeah, that's a tough question. It's always but the audience, I mean, in this case, it's for women and girls only. There's a divide in terms of the chapter that are about the production that are for women in the community. And the last chapter would be, much more about, it's not much more, it is about outside the communities. And there is, a clear difference in terms of also aesthetic, what you find in the production that is made for the community, for the women inside, and also, the question that can be pushed. And while you look at the performance that and Malky Goldman is going to perform tonight, a part that is really pushing certain boundaries, something that wouldn't be possible, for the women and girls only within the community. So in terms of the audience, it is, the divide is clearly between a Jewish audience, I would say, versus a broader audience, a global audience. I mean, in the case of the last chapter, it's definitely a global audience, and how Orthodoxy is perceived outside. So this is, and not only perceived, but also how it is shaped. I remember when I started to say that I'm writing this book, or any time that I write this book, there is always the Netflix, documentary and film that comes out. So a lot about how it is perceived. So it's very interesting to see. But also actually the Jewish audience, the liberal Jewish audience. Mm-hmm. And here there is, so I talk about it in the last in this chapter about the difference in terms of Jewishness and Hasidicness, and how also in the industry there is always this idea that if is the actor Jewish or not, but is it enough to be a liberal Jew to act a Hasidic person, for instance, or to understand? I mean, would it be so different to be non-Jewish versus a liberal Jew who have no necessarily even affinity, So, yes, I hope I give a certain answer.
I would say that the music of Hasidic Cantorial revivalists addresses a community that does not yet exist, and that's kind of not exactly a flaw, but almost like a by design element of their work, or that they're looking towards a model of artists that existed in the past towards the goal of finding a form of collectivity that will exist in the future. And this is there's a kind of a hopefulness, almost a utopian quality to their work, right? They're putting all this energy into something that they can't get a job doing, that there isn't a network already in existence online or in person anywhere, really, right? There's a kind of an interiority around the whole endeavor, and yet it speaks to an issue in the life of the American Jewish community, right, which is what should prayer sound like? And this is an ever-churning question, right? New answers are constantly being come up with. And my sense about their work is that they're a bit stymied by the problems of social control within their community in terms of being able to look for the answer about who is the most ready to receive their music, right? Because they need to look outside of their own community, probably, right? So the book is about what's happening and how they're doing it and why they're doing it, and but in terms of my work as a kind of a friend of the artists or sort of an activist for the music, I'm trying to help them come up with answers to this question.
And this evening is part of that effort,
Sure, sure thing.
which is great. So it's been a privilege for me to be able to ask my questions, and we'd like now to invite you to come up. It looks like there's a mic set up. Oh, someone will be carrying around the mic? Even better. So please, this is a Jewish audience. You're not shy. Somebody raise your hand. Ask the first question, because we don't have a lot of time. We've got to get to the performances. Sam.
Thank you so much. I'll ask it very quickly. Can you tell us, and this might be a little bit more heavy on Jessica's end, can you tell us a little bit more about the shifting boundaries of gender policing, especially because of the fact, even when we were at the Raza concert, there were Chabad men that were present there. And I'm just curious if you could say, both in terms of live performances, but also how these new media are either allowing or not allowing for different anxieties around who is listening to, of course, these tracks that are being performed by women.
Shmuley, I didn't hear the beginning of your question.
What he asked is for you to speak about the shifting boundaries of gender policing.
Oh, I mean, in the case of everything that is in here, for instance, I'm not writing about Hannah's project, so it's definitely for women and girls. I mean, there's no male, men or people identifying as male in the event that I'm talking about. In terms of the policing online, this is very clear. Anybody can log in, and this is, I would say that this parallel, market and also the private studio, where actually there's a lot of don't ask, don't tell, and it's happening, and there are different strategies. This is a lot what I'm talking about, how you gain publicity, and the different possibility that you find to gain publicity through the informal market or also the formal market. So I would say that this is definitely where there is but you always have some backlash. I can talk also. There are some stories of backlash and a lot of, it's not without conflict and without tension and without struggles as well. Yeah. I don't know if I respond.
If I may, I would say that the gender line in my project is not completely real. Because there are women who are performers of chazonos. So I was so many years into my project by the time that I began to encounter Hasidic women who sing this music that it was a bit late for it to get into the thesis or the book, but I'm currently working on a project with women who are performers of chazonos, and then also in terms of reception, I should have said this when I was talking about reception before. Women are a marked demographic as consumers of cantorial music, and this is something which is very notable in terms of the few sites of cantorial performance in the Hasidic community. Ben Zion Miller's monthly Shabbos Mevarchim performance at Beth El in Borough Park. Women always outnumbered men in the audience, in the congregation.
Well, like just to add something that in my case, so even if there is online, but if you organize an event with mixed gender, that would be the line, you know, that would be a very strong, you know, in terms of you, yeah.
It's working good. I'd like to get your thoughts about two instances of ostensibly subculture events that have turned mainstream in very big ways, and why that happened. One is the performer Matisyahu, who has very significant musical presence. And the second is the international acclaim for Shtisel, which is highly esoteric, yet has achieved a huge international audience.
Shtisel is more your terrain.
I'm trying to think what, so you're asking,
I'm asking you
why do
you think, or have comments on how that phenomenon happened?
yeah, I mean,
I'm just going to jump in here for a second and say that Shtisel is really, really good soap opera. And if you like soap opera, it's a great soap opera, and it's about a group of people that you didn't expect it from.
I mean, I would say that Unorthodox also was extremely, there is this kind of a very strong interest for those seclusive communities. It's not only, you know, it's Unorthodox, it's Shtisel, but indeed, this is and I think you can connect it to the unknown. Maybe if you think about also Mormons, there is also any kind of, you know, community that is, that there's not necessarily a certain knowledge or interest or attraction. And also it's, what is maybe new with this new industry, this is what I'm talking about the book, is that you have people from within the community who left the community, who are part now and who are making the industry. Malky Goldman, who's gonna come, you know, very soon, is one of the you know, of the women that I work with, and I think this is a shift also to have people from within the community talking and explaining and giving some legitimacy also about the cinema, something that we almost didn't have in the past. You know, it's yeah, a pretty, I would say, new phenomenon. And about Matisyahu, maybe you have something to say. I don't. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't really have anything to say about Matisyahu. Pretty far afield from either of our projects. It's an interesting question. Maybe we can talk about it some other time.
Yeah, I think maybe two more questions, and keep them short, because we want to get to the performers.
So I loved your comparison of cantorial music with jazz. I hadn't really thought about it in that way, but it made me think if I ever go to hear a cantorial concert, it's really, for me, about some sort of recreation. So who is the John Coltrane of the, you know, Chazonus world, and how far can they stretch the elasticity of the tradition until it, you know, until it resembles modern jazz? Are they able to do that?
In the current cantorial scene, the music is not at that level yet, I would say. You know, the cantors are mostly focusing on developing a set of skills that are kind of, I don't want to say lost, but extremely rare, right? So the kind of, a lot of the energy is on pedagogy and figuring out how to use old records as a way to kind of reclaim sort of the fundamentals, in a way, of the music. In the early 20th century, you know, period when the cantors were being recorded by major record labels, and there was a lot of communal energy going into cantorial music. There were, you know, a dozen stars, and then a couple dozen more artists who were, you know, making records, and then on top of that, many dozen other artists who maybe didn't make records but had active careers, and who's the Coltrane? I mean, that's a funny question. Maybe Glantz, Liebe Glantz, perhaps, a modernist composer who was also a great cantor, who was very forward-thinking in terms of his approach to harmony. Could be. Okay.
Did you want to add? So one more question. Yeah.
So this question is more for Jessica. So in looking towards the future of the world of Jewish Orthodox women in media, do you foresee a maintenance of status quo in terms of just performance being targeted towards the female audience, or do you foresee a future where there is a more diverse audience in terms of gender?
I think if you're talking about live events, if there is a possibility, I think if we're talking about live event, there is definitely a line that will be, it's the limit for what is. I mean, it depends on which women and what they want to do by doing something like this. But there's going to be some consequences. So it depends which type of career they want to have. And I think this is, going back to your question of the audience, it's always where you're going to perform and how you're going to perform and what you're going to, stage will have certain impact on who is going to be also your market and your audience. So if there are some of the women or celebrity or from female artists that I'm writing about are going there, maybe it depends what they're looking for, but there is definitely a risk to lose their audience, their core audience. So, yeah, I'm not responding to your question. We'll see, I doubt.
Do you predict a mainstreaming of the idea?
A mainstreaming?
Yeah, of the idea of mixed gender performances?
Mixed gender? No. Audience.
Not within that community.
No, not within that community. That's not the goal, You don't change, al-ha is al-ha, in certain specific space.
Well, it's been a privilege being up here on the stage. This is the part of the show where I turn into the audience, so if you want to interview me later on that experience, you're welcome to. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. A hand for Jonathan Boyarin.
Okay, I think there's sound now. So this is the second part of the evening, so we are turning to the performance. So in this section of performance, we'll also have some readings of our book. So I'm going to start by reading some section of my chapter that is called The Translocal Ethnographer, Encountering Ultra-Orthodox Women in the Arts. So following this reading, Malky Goldman is going to enter. And the idea of this reading and the performance is to connect the story of Goldie, that I'm going to give you some words here, that are extremely, I would say, romantic, where you can really get into this idea of the positive aspect of performance and singing and learning piano. And in this section, you don't have a sense of the struggle also, or the consequences, or this individual choice and what it can lead to within, or the tension within the family and also the surrounding. So Malky Goldman is going to perform the tension that it can occur when individuals decide to make certain choices and how the family is leading with. It feels like only yesterday when I met Goldie for the first time in Montreal. I was Goldie's piano teacher from 2016 to 2017, and since then, a shared love of music has sustained our friendship. I witnessed Goldie growing up as she developed from a shy, talented, and artistic child to a confident woman, full of grace and elegance, working full-time as an administrative assistant, enrolled in college, singing, acting, and playing the piano informally, as well as recording her music in her home studio, owned by Montreal Hasidic woman, Rachel. From the first time we met at her parents' home for Shabbos in May 2016, Goldie set herself apart. After she lit the candle with her mother, Rivka, I started a conversation about my childhood in French Guiana, my backgrounds in the arts, and my appreciation of Yiddish and Hasidic music. While Goldie's siblings were moving in and out of the living room, she herself was very attentive to the conversation, looking at me with a mix of curiosity, suspicion, and interest, certainly puzzled by my presence. She then asked me, Rivka, about my research and told her that I wanted to explore the Hasidic women's artistic space, since many people present Hasidic women as unable to express themselves artistically and as subjugated to men. Rivka objected, and I quote, "People look at us from women as oppressed, uneducated, and uncreative, but they are wrong. There are plenty of talented and artistic women in our communities. We just do not expose it publicly to prevent men from accessing it. It is also a different way to look at the arts, but we also have our own female dancers, singers, composers, and filmmakers. They just create differently because they are guided by the law of the Torah." Rivka's comments brought a different perspective on the Hasidic feminine art world, reflecting on ways to define and express artistic creativity without exposing names, faces, and bodies. Once Rivka's husband arrived from shul and we started the meal, the sounds of the family Shabbos illustrated Rivka's comment on female talent and expression. The couple's sons and daughters alternated between singing in unison and harmony. Goldie and her sisters display no timidity. Their bright and colorful voices rose above those of their brothers. I sense this cohesion and complementarity, but I could also perceive the rivalry among the children in the performance for the Shabbos and for me, the guest. Besides this vivid musical experience at the Shabbos table, Goldie frequented the home recording studio to make those recordings and share them via email with her cousins and friends across North America and Israel. Over the years, I witnessed several Hasidic women, besides Goldie, using the home studio to transform their artistic talents and productions into an informal market that has been legitimized by advertisements from women's art-related businesses, produced and disseminated in the ultra-Orthodox press without images of their faces. And
Bobby, I'm done being quiet. And Mommy, as much as I am so sad about this whole situation of yours, du verstehst, als wenn ich bin gewesen, ein klein Mädel, habe ich allemal gedacht, Achtung geben den Kindern von den jüngeren Kindern. Oder habe ich gedacht, sein in the kitchen, oder changing seine diapers. Ich habe keinem nicht gehabt an Childhood. Und ich habe sich nicht beklagt, okay? Ich habe sich nicht beklagt, because alles, was ich habe gewollt sehen, ist, als Mann hält uns so sein, happy und zufrieden. Und das ist gewesen meine einzigste Sache, was ich habe gewollt. Und von dem habe ich Tage weggegeben in mein Leben. Weißt, Mami, ich bin keinem nicht gegangen, zu Shabbaton. Ich bin keinem nicht weggegangen auf ein Sleepover mit meinen Friends. Weil die sich nicht gekannt haben, weggeben oder einzugeben und mir. Und Mami, okay, ich verstehe. Ich habe es getan mit dem ganzen Herz. Es ist fein. Es ist gut, but Mami, Emmersdig, es ist gekommen in Mountain. Mami, wenn sie gekommen von Mountain, Pink Demons, als die decided, die kennst du mehr nicht. Und Pink Demons bist da weggegangen. Mami, was ist denn gedacht für Shame? Mami, du bist so geschämt. Mami, alles was ich habe getan, mein ganzes Leben habe ich getan, ich soll dann the perfect Mädel. Ich soll können in the perfect Schiedech, in Favos, for you to just ruin it for me. Mommy, it's fine. I have a perfect husband. I'm not complaining. He's good. He's very good to me. He's fine. But honestly, it's not the husband was a gedacht. This is not how my life was supposed to be. Mommy, for husband was lernt den ganzen Tag. Ja, das habe ich gedacht. Ich habe nicht gedacht, der Husband was arbeitet den ganzen Tag. In ein Schuh hat er gelernt. For sein Husband, aber ich kann gehen, I don't know, to the mall mit meinen Friends. Oder ich habe viele gekannt gehen to the beach. Ich habe gekannt, was ich habe gewollt. Ich habe nicht gedacht, for sein Husband, aber wegen mein ganzes Leben, okay?
All right, I'm going to read the beginning of chapter 1, Animating the Archive, Old Records and Young Singers. Zevi Steiger knew that he was different from other young men. Sensitive and attuned to music and emotion, he sometimes got into trouble in yeshiva for his chronic lateness, despite being an excellent student academically. As he told me, later I learned I'm not the only one. There are a lot of people who are creative, who are into art and stuff like that have difficulty with that. Listening to old Cantorial records and learning to sing the pieces he loved was the signal manifestation of his burgeoning creative identity. Yanki Lemmer, the most commercially successful cantor among the participants in this study, told me that among his friends growing up, they were into music, but not chazonis. I was the only oddball. Being a fan of cantorial music was a marker of his nonconformity. Yoel Kohn connects his love of chazonis to a period of disaffected youth when he was bored out of his mind, when he was desperate for an aesthetic outlet that could express his developing world of feeling. Speaking about his cohort of young Hasidic cantorial revivalists, he said, "That's part of what made us. We were all sort of artistic. We were deprived. We had no outlets. We had to focus inside. We had to become introspective in order to achieve any sort of artistic or creative outlet, any sort of creative climax." Shimmy Miller similarly described chazonis as part of the emotional turbulence of a sensitive youth striving to define an adult identity. It's like it's part of the transformation. It's just part of the chronological order of things. You're a teen, you have all kinds of things on your mind. So I started getting into listening to chazonis, mainly old chazonim. In another conversation with Shimmy, I asked him to elaborate on what it was about chazonis that attracted some young Hasidic singers to this as their genre of choice. They feel pulled to it. It's just an art form. You have something you're interested in, right? What drew you to chazonis? This moment of ethnographic reversal felt significant to me. Shimmy was cautioning me against essentializing Hasidic musicians by ascribing a meaning to the Hasidic cantorial phenomenon that was qualitatively different from the aesthetic desires of other artistically inclined people, those without marked identities. Shimmy was advocating for his right to what philosopher Edouard Glissant calls opacity. He was claiming the right to pursue abstraction and pure aesthetics that is often denied to people who have visible identities and who are expected by outsiders to represent their collectivities, not their own agentic desires. Shimmy was also drawing my attention to the fact that Hasidic cantorial revivalists have ascribed a surprising meaning to chazonis. They understand century-old records of Jewish sacred music as an art form along the lines of other musical styles that can illuminate an artistic path of nonconformity and self-discovery. These Hasidic singers share in common a conception of chazonis as a genre that is appropriate for use in grappling with their world, defining a non-conforming social stance, and coming to terms with feelings of personal difference from the norm. Rather than viewing the music as primarily a conservative retention of an old form of Jewish religious practice, we should understand that chazonis serves as a genre of performance and creative practice. This conception of the social potentials of the genre push against a strictly conceived binary between religious authority and conceptions of creativity. The engagement of Hasidic Cantorial revivalists with chazonis suggests a novel way of looking at the history of the music. It raises the question, what qualities inhere in gramophone-era cantorial music that make it appropriate as the basis for a nonconformist musical practice?
In Beis HaMedrash beim Ständer sitzt der alte Rebsender in Blätter dem alten Mishnayos. Plötzlich lässt dreht röhren, oi weh Gott, was wird werden? Nito bei mir keine Shalom Bayis. Ich hab 7 Bonim, gor proste Yevonim, sie spaten vor der Greise Beheire. Und sie mein sie Gusse, schreit, bring mir Panusse. Und ich hab kein Zeit nicht, ich darf lernen teure. Sei mir moicheri boine sheloilam, alle tiftach beleso. Hast mir geschenkt, 7 Sinne sei jeder von sie a Geulam. Ich weiß nicht, in wem sie zusammen geraten. Kann ein Jiddisch Wort willen sie nicht nehmen in Meul. A Blatt gemurre, jup lernen, zu dem Sinne sie voll. Nur die Achille legt seine Sehnen. Gib sie Gott mir an Eite, was ich soll mit Seite. Und sie meint sie Gusse, wollt gewesen nicht Kusche. Wenn sie lass mich nur lernen, sie beit nicht kein Panusse. Sie die größte Jafeire, Tag und Nacht ist ihm alle Geire. Nu frag ich dir Gott, ist das nicht kein Chet? Auf die ältere Juren, Gott gei sich in Get. Rebein, neu Shaloilam, ich bitte dir mein dir, auf die ältere Juren, will ich diese Gier, ich beit nicht Cholile von dir Besimunem, nur die sei me Farnes, de Freu mit die Bohnen. Ich bin a Yid, allam nervil mein Bakusche, ich will sitzen in lernen, in a day, nur die Kip sei Parnes.
now I'm going to read the beginning of the last chapter that is called The Public Artist, Legitimizing Hasidicness, Diversifying Jewishness. Following this, this reading, this first chapter starts with a description of the God of Vengeance and my encounter with Malky Goldman at this moment, and she's going to read a part of this monologue following this reading. In New Yiddish Rap staging of the play God of Vengeance, Malky Goldman's role was far from a Hasidic upbringing in Mea Shearim, Yerushalayim. As a result, a Jewish prostitute, Malky traded her everyday clothes for a hot pink romper with a black corset, her décolleté, red skirt with black flowers, black tights, and high-heeled boots were extensions of the character. Her body language followed suit as she flirted with clients by playing with her legs to offer a better view of her flesh. On March 22nd, 2017, at the theater at St. Clement in Manhattan, I saw Malky act in front of an audience eager to see the modern version of a controversial play written by Shalom Asch in the early 20th century. Exploring Orthodox Judaism, prostitution, and same-sex love, the scandalous play is set in a brothel owned by Yankel, an Orthodox Jew who is trying to marry off his daughter to a yeshiva student while she falls in love with one of the brother's prostitutes. While in many ways foreign to Malky's former life in Jerusalem, the play overlaps with that experience in two key respects: its use of the Yiddish language and its exploration of Jewish orthodoxy. Some ultra-Orthodox women, such as Malky Goldman, exercise agency by breaking with religious authorities and finding a new authoritative force, the art industry in the public space. These public-facing performances exist alongside those limited to women community members, which we explore in previous chapters. The Hasidic women who do not follow Hasidic life anymore and participate in these public-facing performances do not necessarily cater to women and girls, but move away from religious norms. In their everyday lives, their appearance and dress do not connote Hasidicness. They do not wear sheitel, tichel, or skirts. They are openly non-believers, casting off the markers of Jewishness in favor of the same clothing worn by North American secularists and liberals. Generally, however, as they may come back to their families and communities from time to time, they re-embrace and embody Hasidicness out of respect, a process that keeps them allied with the community. For her part, Malky remains a painter in her Hasidic community and has been teaching women and girls there for years. Several nights a week, she leaves her apartment in a black dress, covering her elbows, knees, thick stockings, flat shoes, and a tichel covering her hair. In these Hasidic clothes, she joins her student at her art garage in her back of her parents' home between Flatbush and Borough Park. There, she guides them in producing still life, landscape, or painting using photos for reference, but she also encouraged them towards less conventional abstract art. Some students also learn art history, as Malky introduced them to the aesthetics and techniques of various art schools. Malky does not discuss her public life with her clients or her family. Some of her siblings discuss and know about her career in theater and cinema, but she carefully restricts with whom she discusses her outside life. She navigates carefully between these disparate social universes, following the norms and rules of each while within it, thereby performing two Malkys, one frum, the other secular.
Don't we love the rain? Don't we? How the rain smells. Exactly like the apples by us at home, left to drain in the garret. It is, you know, the first May rain. The first May rain in our house, back at home in my house, they must be already making the first stav. It's soup, cold soup, with lots of fresh vegetables. Oh, I love them. I know when the May rain comes, when it pours, like tonight. You know? In the May rain, in my home, they already have stab and borscht, and I love it so much. And then the goats must be already grazing in the fields, and then the rafts must be already in the water. Oh, and Franek takes the chicks to the bar, and he dances with them. Oh my gosh! Oh, and all the wives must already be making cheesecake because it's almost Shavuos. We have to have cheesecake for Shavuos. No? Yeah? You know what? I'm gonna buy a new ballerina, a summer ballerina, and I'm gonna go home for the Shavuos to visit. You see how I would look in this kapelush, strolling down the collier on Shavuos. They would platz. They would, they poop out the bile from envy. No, right? No, I can't go. I'm not gonna go. I'm just so scared of my father, you know. My father, he's been looking for me around everywhere, and he's looking for me with the big iron pile. And once he found me at the Kretschmer with Franek, and he gave me such a clap on my arm. I still have that mark until now. Yeah, he'll kill me. You know, I come from a good home. My father is a butcher. Okay. The guys I could have married, the shidduchs I could have had, let me tell you. One was Notke the meat cleaver. I still have the gold ring he gave me. He gave it to me in Chalamoid Sukkot. Did he want to be my chassan? Only I didn't wanna. He stinks of ox flesh. You know, they called him stinky. Go marry a stinky, and every year make another stinky. And look, here I am. I'm a free woman. I have my basket of fancy underpants. And I have respectable outfits. I have dresses at least a little bit nicer than the rich man's wife back at home. Yeah. If I wore this down Marshalkovsky Street, I would become a sensation. Sparks would fly. You know, I wish that everyone in my town could see me like this. I would sashay down from the station. It's nice, right? It's good. They'd explode out of spite in a fit of poo-poo-plaxy right there, and then they drop on the ground, writing in agony on the sidewalk. My mother died because of it. She couldn't bear it. You know, the heart tells, and I've never even been to her grave. But sometimes, you know, sometimes she comes to me in my dreams in the middle of the night, and she's wearing her burial shroud, and she brings me stuff to eat. But when I go to take the staff, her fingers, they become like prickly thorns, and then she grabs my hand with a handful. Oh, but
Okay, I'll read a little bit from the conclusion of my new book, and all right, thank you. Chazanus, as described in archival Yiddish press sources and as reimagined by present-day fans, was a performance genre both in the sense of it being a form of expressive culture and as a form of activity in the social world of Jews. Singing Chazanus had an immediate secondary life as a theatrical script that interpolated listeners as participants in the world of the music. Chazanus acts on the bodies of its listeners, inducing embodied responses. Chazanus is what film scholar Linda Williams might refer to as a body genre, a form of art like the horror film or melodrama, which is meant to elicit specific physical responses such as shock, fear, or sorrow. One of the intended responses to the cantor's voice is the shedding of tears. The cantorial vocal style offers the listener specific sonic cues to this scripted response through the repertoire of vocal noises imitative of sobbing or sighing. These sounds engender a mimetic response, gesturing towards practices of introspection, memory, and emotional flooding the listeners are intended to experience. As Yiddishist and literary critic Zohar Wyman-Kelman notes, there is a particular charge to opening one's own body as a resonant space for the feeling worlds of artists in the past to be re-articulated. There is a powerful eros and aesthetic communion across time. Reanimating texts or bodies of sounds from archival sources opens a variety of questions. Who are you when you allow the voice of a ghost to enter into you and speak? Who are you? What comment or truth can you offer regarding the present moment if your voice is reinforced by the lineage of bodies that you are in numinous dialogue with? What becomes of a performance genre with its unique social script when it enters into a marginalized state and disappears into the archive, no longer acting on the bodies of listeners, no longer operational as a performative object that affects the mood and spirit of its audience? Does the unheard gramophone record lie in a mystically suspended state like the spirits of the dead are sometimes described as doing, awaiting resurrection? Are old records like the Zohar in the centuries between the time of its depicted action in first century Palestine and its publication to the world in 14th century Spain a kind of divine immanence awaiting comprehension and integration into the life of the community? What kind of sociality can be retrieved from a text that has gone underground, that is hidden either by intentional obfuscation or insensate neglect? According to Lurianic Kabbalistic traditions, the performance of mitzvahs, of ritual laws, can be accompanied by a second layer of meaning beyond the explicitly stated significance of the act. For example, the ritual act of putting on the talis, the prayer shawl, can be accompanied by a slate of associative concepts relating to the secret meanings of the ritual, binding the body of the worshiper to a conception of the presence of the supernatural. These secondary meanings are thought to reflect the ways in which ritual acts in the divine realm, beyond the explicit meanings and contexts of the visible. These second layers of intentionality are referred to as kavanas, or intention. In a folklorized form, the same term references a more generalized sense of heightened feeling in prayer or ritual. A cantor's prayer leading is intended to initiate a state of kavana in the listener. The body of the listener performs its own internal drama, prompted by the sound of the cantor. The dialogue between liturgical text, the emotional script initiated by cantorial performance, and the body of the listener recalls the scripted mystical intentions composed by Kabbalists to focus the prayer experience. The sociality of cantorial prayer leading is dependent on a listener who will work with the musical material that a cantor provides, unspooling the meaning of the musical performance, understanding it as a form of commentary on the liturgy, and transforming it into the material for a heightened state of embodied ritual experience. Okay, I'll stop there.
Test. Ooh. Ooh. You know how they say break a leg? I did it. So I'd like to speak a little about the pieces that I have performed and will be performing. The previous one was probably the most misogynistic song that I know. Not counting maybe some of the fringes of rap. The protagonist is their alter absender. He considers himself a great scholar, a sage. And that's the reason I love this song is because it's the target of its humor is not his wife. It's the man. He's ridiculous. He thinks that he should not be laden with his 7 sons. He should not have to feed his wife. She eats too much. He's such a lamdan. He needs God to take care of all of that so that he could sit in shul and he's useless even as a lamdan. That was the first song we performed for you tonight. The next two will be, at first we'll have a piece from the Shabbos morning liturgy of Makhalois. This would have been the kind of davening people would have heard in the golden age of Cantorial music, right? Sorry, I'm squinting. They're intent on blinding me. I don't know what they're trying to, yeah. And the second one will be a piece by Chazan Kwarten. The first one is composed by Reutmann. The second one will be a piece by Chazan Kwarten, much more famous Chazan nowadays. It's Avinu Malkeinu. It deals with such happy subjects as victims of mass murder and how God should take vengeance in their name.
Shekein choivas Shekein choivas kolay tzurim lifonecha dehishem Elokeinu Levorech leyawale olekale Alikal Ivrei Shirais Shirais
So Yoel has asked me to introduce the next piece, which I didn't have planned, but that's okay. Zavel Kvartin is a very important part of the Cantorial revivalist scene, both because of his music. He composed a series of records. I mean, he was one of the first cantors to record. You know, he was making his first records in 1902, 1903 in Europe. But then after immigrating to the United States, in the 20s, he made these records that have come to be kind of emblematic of old world sound. And it's notable that this kind of apotheosis of the cantorial sound, right? These kind of really, really definitional records, which are supposed to kind of comment upon the European Jewish experience, were actually made in New York, right? With this kind of the distance of the immigration experience to color and recontextualize the memory of the old home. So this is not one of the classics, right? He's got a handful of hits that all of the cantors sing and that have stayed in circulation through reissue albums. This is more of a deep cut, so to speak. Yeah. And apparently it's one of Yoel's dad's favorites. So Yoel's father, Meyer Baruch Kohn, is a great Baal Tefillah in the Satmar community. And what Yoel, what do you think?
It is basically a piece of improvisation that he did in the studio and ended up on a record. The funny thing about growing up in in Hasidic Cantorial music, they didn't really have an idea of what a recording studio would be like, how you just sit around, and so I guess they don't have this idea that these recorded pieces, some of them are pure improv. So when you do it, and you do it with even a semi, hemi, demi quaver off, there are some people who will express opinions about it. So in order not to offend them, we wrote out every single note, hopefully, because it's very hard to do someone else's improvisations.
Oh, there we go. Actually, I don't have anything to do with this. Yoel wrote it out, and Yoel, musicologists in the room would come and take a look afterwards, because he wrote it out right to left. You know how music is usually written left to right, the way the Latin script is. He wrote it according to the Hebrew script, from right to left. So, which I don't know of anyone else living who does that. That's
I don't know that music has
like,
handedness.
Yeah, or it's more like A.Z. Edelson back in 1903 or something. But okay, well, what do you say? Shall we have it?
Let's go for it.
All right.
Leman hoharugim, leman huarugim, asay. Leman hoharugim al Shem Kodishecho. Avinu, Malky. Asay leman, oy vey asay leman tivruchim, asay leman, oy vey leman tivruchim al yechudecho. Oy vey Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu. Asay, asay, asay leman boy boyish, leman boy boyish, leman boy boyish, Avinu Malkeinu, leman boy boyish, leman boy boyish. Boyish, boyish uvamayim. Ahal kiddush shemecho. דם עבודך. Dam avudecho, dam avudecho,
Thank you so much, everybody. Jessica and I will be out in front with some copies of our books and some bottles of wine, and incredibly grateful to YIVO for hosting us today, and especially to Jonathan Boyarin for his beautiful moderation. And thank you all so much for being here. Thank you.